Hello and welcome to All the Games You Like Are Bad. I'm your jungler, Mark Bigney, and today we're going to be talking about Mechs vs. Minions by Riot Games. Mechs vs. Minions is a co-op action programming game that was designed by Chris Cantrell, Rick Ernst, Stone Librande, Preston Sarawat, and Nathan Terras. It's a redevelopment of a print-and-play game called Weapons of Zombie Destruction, also by Stone Librande. I tried this game several years ago, long before anyone had ever heard of Mechs vs. Minions, and to be honest, I didn't enjoy it in the slightest. It was confusing, the cards didn't make a whole lot of sense, everything had to be referenced back to the rulebook, and it was a print and play, so it didn't help that the components were ugly. Oh, what a difference a few $1 billion in revenue can change. More on all that later. But fast forward, and it's been published by Riot Games in a new version called Mechs vs. Minions with new scenarios and everything, and thanks to this, Riot Games now actually legitimately gets to be called Riot Games with the plural, because previously all they'd ever done was League of Legends, the MOBA game, and MOBA is a particular style of game that I find quite interesting, but I don't actually enjoy playing. Something about the 45-minute long matches and the rampant abuse hurled at me by internet randos turned me off of the genre. I'm just weird that way. Now, Riot Games wasn't exactly prepared for the demand. They produced a somewhat limited print run, even though it was a large number of copies, and the merch store got overloaded. And despite the fact that they shipped lots and lots of product all over the world, they weren't prepared for everyone descending on their website in a very specified period of time, and so a number of people had difficulty getting a copy. I was one of the people sitting there hitting F5 trying to get my copy, and sure enough, I did get one of the first run, but I did get very familiar with her 404 arrow page. So, this game shares the same universe as League of Legends, but that's about it. It's not a MOBA game. It doesn't seek to recreate any of the sort of conventions or standards of a MOBA game. You don't have any of those elements that I find really interesting. Instead, all that it borrows is some of the characters and some elements of the universe. But really, let's be honest, League of Legends is pretty themeless, very much like HeroScape. The theme of HeroScape was, ill-defined mythological figures summon all manner of thematically disparate and distinct things from all manner of time zones, and then they fight. And that's more or less the theme of League of Legends. I'm sorry if I haven't read, the tie-in novels or comic books that make it all super compelling, but really it's just a whole bunch of different characters that get thrown into an arena, and then they try to kill each other. So really, in this game, Mechs vs. Minions, you just have visual callbacks to a subset of some of the things that go on in League of Legends. So if you're a die-hard League of Legends fan and you want something that kind of tries to recreate this, well then, look towards the horde of board games that are seeking to try to recreate the MOBA experience, which is another subgenre that I find very interesting. But anyway, Mechs vs. Minions. So, here's the thing. I don't normally do unboxings. It's not my style, it's not what I do, it's not what I'm good at. But, sometimes a brother's gotta make an exception. Sorry, servers got overloaded. Let's try that again. Alright, so here's what you got. For reference, this is the size of a adult male non-Donald Trump hand. The box is pretty big and heavy. The box, you can't really see this on the camera, is embossed. This has got some raised detailing on the top of it, which is, kind of incredible. Then we try to... Oh, dear Lord, I'm out of shape. So then what we have here are, we've got some rule books. The actual rule book itself is very, very slim. We have some references. We've got an incredibly unnecessary, jokey kind of welcome to the universe thing with some funny stuff on the back. So first off, a note about the insert. You can see there, it's got details on it for no earthly bloody reason. The tray sorts everything really nicely. We have solid metal components. These are actually pretty heavy. You have these custom painted dice. Two, you don't need two. You only need one, but there are two of each, just, cuz. These suckers, which are, suckers, minions in 4 different sculpts with a wash on them. They all fit in every slot for minions. The slots themselves were designed in such a way that every minion pose can fit in any of the slots, which is a nice touch and really kind of cool. Yet more minions, because there are lots of minions. Yet more minions. And then there's just ridiculous detailing in here for no earthly reason. They didn't need to do that. Here are the actual player mechs, which probably have, hands down the best pre-painted quality I've ever seen in absolutely any game ever, period, no question. The scenarios are all presented in their own unique envelope. So you get to tear it open and feel like you're some sort of double-axe super spy, which of course is a well-established trope. Just a note, by the way, the first scenario has a misprint. The first scenario says that you should have additional components. There are no additional components in the first scenario. You're not missing anything. Then what we have underneath is yet more stuff. You have the planning boards, which are really thick and huge. No embossing, though, so 1 out of 10, unsubscribe. We have wells for cards with details underneath for no earthly reason. More minions, because you always need more. We have this bomb thing. Lots of cards. The card quality is really good, and the cards are well done. They present all the information you need right on them. You don't really need to reference anything. We have a tracker. We've got some tiles. The tiles also have a sort of shiny feature on them, so that you see that reflective element in the middle of the repair pad over there. You feel the texture. They're double-sided, so there's weird nonsense on the other side. Underneath their tile, there's more stuff. There's just more stuff. There's more stuff. There's more stuff. I mean, it's just there's always more stuff. There's just more. There's more. There's always more. And then there's the secret box. And it's got a magnetic enclosure for no earthly reason. And let's look what's inside. This is what happens when a largish company, and it doesn't take much to be a large company in the scale of hobby board games, produces a labor of love. The closest analog, and indeed the most overproduced game that I'd ever encountered prior to this, was probably the 3rd and 4th editions of Space Hulk. And very much like Space Hulk, Mechs vs. Minions doesn't have a lot of component crawl. Sometimes when a game box is full of stuff, playing it is a pain. There are dozens of different kinds of tokens and unique specifiers, or maybe there's 6 different types of minis, and it's a pain to sort them all out, and eventually you just end up using proxies or whatever, and that blunts a lot of the visual appeal of the game, and it makes you feel like you've wasted a lot of these components. Not so in Mechs vs. Minions. After setup, which is non-trivial, but it's not a huge beast, you don't need other components other than just massive amounts of minions, which are all interchangeable. So it's not really a tedious affair of dealing with all these lovely bits of plastic. It's just a joy, visually and tactilely. Very well done. So, Mechs vs. Minions is a co-op action programming game. Action programming is where you slot out actions in advance and then they execute, and you get to see how good or bad of a planner you are. The key novelty in Mechs vs. Minions is that your program persists and evolves. Allow me to explain. In other action programming games, most notably Robo Rally, you have your cards, you program them out, your program gets executed, and then your program wipes, and you start again next round from scratch. In Mechs vs. Minions, what you do is you cooperatively draft program cards that go into your command line, and then those cards stay for the next round. And then you prop another command card, and another, and another, and another. And your program, which starts out very, very feeble, starts to become very, very impressive. What this does is it throttles the information flow, so you don't have to, the program that you're making on turn 1 is trivial compared to the program that you're making on turn 10, as opposed to a game like Robo Rally where, as of turn 1, you have to hit the ground running, which sometimes is fine, but it's nice when a game stages the information at you. There's another benefit of the arc, which I'll talk about later, but it does lend itself to having a significant arc. At the beginning, you're puny and can't really do much. By the end of the game, you're tremendously powerful. Added to this novelty is the notion of programs having 3 levels of power. When you first slot a program, it's a power 1, and there are 4 different colors of program. As you put additional programs of the same color on the same line, they become much more powerful. Some programs start out relatively good and don't level up tremendously. Others work the other way around, where they start out relatively feeble and they get a lot better as they program up, and others have a more smooth progression. Anyway, it leads to an interesting further differentiation of the programs, an interesting tactical and strategic choice. Do I want another step of my command program, or do I want to make one of my pre-existing programs better? It also allows you to change gears. A problem with this kind of game might be if you're stuck with this incredibly intricate command line and you want to pivot to be able to try to do something else, you might feel like you're losing a lot of progress. But here, if you've got a level 3 green program that you want to swap out, suddenly you don't need movement anymore, you need more offense, well, just hope that you get that green offense card slotted on top of your green stack and suddenly you're a death machine. So that really works well. It leads to a lot of little clever trade-offs. It's not the deepest game in the world, but it is fun. and it helps you grow your program in stages while not locking you in to some kind of predetermined path. So really well done on that score. It's also the case that for those that care for the so-called alpha gamer problem, your cards are drafted cooperatively under a timer, so you probably don't have time to tell everyone what to take. Once you take your card, you can slot it at leisure, so if you've got some jerk that still wants to look over your shoulder and tell you where to put it, that's still going to be an issue. Anyway, don't play with those jerks. I don't like jerks. We are taking a radical, controversial stance here on All the Games You Like Are Bad, is that jerks are bad. All the jerks you like are bad. So, some people have described Mechs vs. Minions in a way that makes it sound like it's kind of a legacy game, in that the game state permanently changes as you move on. This is not true. It's not a legacy game. It is a scenario-based game. There are 10 scenarios that are nominally linked by the flimsiest of stories. There's some relatively cute flavor text in the scenarios, and that's all for the good, but we're not talking about some sort of overarching narrative or character development where you get invested in things. My apologies if you do get invested in these guys, whatever. I mean, more power to you. More rules are gradually introduced, but you don't change the rulebook with stickers or anything. Instead, what happens is the initial rulebook is very, very, very slim. Again, contributes to the simplicity of the game. But the further rules that are introduced in specific little scenario booklets, if you have to refer to them again, you're not expected to go back to the earlier scenarios. Instead, there is a reference work that has a glossary, and so you look it up there. It actually works really well. I think if the game were more complicated, this wouldn't function properly. It would be too difficult to remember all the different rules, and you'd be consulting the glossary constantly. But even though I didn't play regularly, as in I didn't knock out all the scenarios all at once, I didn't have much of a difficulty remembering the rules that were introduced in Scenario 2, for example, while playing Scenario 6. And when I did, you just have to look at the glossary, and the glossary is very comprehensive, and it's all very well done. This is the way you do a multi-rulebook format, where you don't have any difficulty finding things, so good job on that. So it's more or less like any game with reasonably robust scenarios that introduce new rules into it. A game like Claustrophobia, for example. This isn't a game, this is at least more robust than other games that have, make your own scenario systems, like, Battlelore 2nd Edition or something along those lines. So it's not really legacy, but it does kind of change in subsequent scenarios. Anyhow, the scenarios are introduced in little envelopes, so you do get to tear open envelopes to see what the next scenario is going to be like. And they do introduce new cards, but really at the end of the day, it's more of a scenario-based game than it is a legacy game. So yeah, there's that. It does help with the replay value. The replay value wouldn't have been especially bad if you were just expecting to replay a given scenario, but the fact that there are 10 different scenarios does help with the variety considerably. So it didn't really need that help all that much, but it is a boost. Now, some scenarios are better than others. My personal preference is for the scenarios that have a built-in timer. Some scenarios, you just keep going until you either win or some minions manage to do some nasty thing to some kind of target that you have to protect. Those scenarios can drag. If you build your mechs into colossal death machines, and you're just clearing away lots and lots of minions, but you aren't quite sophisticated enough to get the victory conditions done, then the scenarios can be a bit tedious and you're just sitting there waiting, and sometimes it's because your partner can't do what they're supposed to do. Then there are scenarios with built-in timers, whereby you can't really stop the progress of the enemies, and once they pass a certain threshold, you're going to lose. Those ones I prefer. They seem to have a little bit more tension, and they don't drag. On that topic, the game is very easy. Generally speaking, you don't have much trouble, even with new players, even with relatively inept players, or people that don't really know what they're doing. You're probably going to win most of the time. And that would be a problem if you had this tremendous sense of we've got this in the bag right from the jump. But as I mentioned before, the game has an arc. You start out relatively useless and become an invincible death machine by the end of a session. So as a result, at the very start of the game, you feel like things are going to be hard because you know what the victory conditions are, and you also know that you're a weakling. So even though I played multiple times, and every time I go into a new scenario, I expect to be able to win, during the very early turns, I still feel like I have an insurmountable challenge ahead of us. By the midpoint, then you start to feel like maybe you can get things together, and then by the end it's a cakewalk. But that's okay, because again, you don't have this overarching sense of everything being trivial. So this is another virtue of the way the action programming works, the sort of evolving program line. It's also the case that this game does something that I think every action programming game of this ilk ought to do. I mentioned in my review of the Dragon and Flagon that although it was a good game, misplays weren't especially fun. If you screw up in your programming, mostly you just end up missing and nothing happens. In Mechs vs. Minions, misplays are fun. You end up stomping in the wrong direction, usually end up killing some minions in the process, so you feel like you're making some progress, and, killing things is fun. That's why we play video games, to exercise our enjoyment of murder, right? That's why we play games. That's why you play games, right? That's definitely why I play games. And sometimes you end up pushing your friends, and then they end up doing something weird and wacky, and so there's this overarching notion of, if I screw up, at least something interesting will happen, certainly at least by the midpoint. And that is really one of the things that I look for in an action programming game of this ilk, especially when it's cooperative. And this game definitely delivers in a way that a lot of other games of this type haven't in recent memory. So what we're left with is a game that, by all rights, in terms of the actual components, would easily be marketed for 150 plus American dollars in the current market. But Riot Games, in part because they have more money than pick your favorite divinity here, can sell it for 75, and presumably they're either taking a loss or only making a margin on it because they're shipping direct from their own warehouses and their own distribution chain. But it is a very, very light, very simple game with absolutely beautiful components. I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for. It pleased me to no end. I'm a sucker for good components sometimes, and everything is well designed, and it's a joy to play with, and it looks really good on the table. And I don't mind an occasional really light action programming game. I feel like I got my money's worth. So that's really a judgment you need to make for yourself. There is one thing that I do miss, though, that League of Legends absolutely delivers that this game manifestly does not. And that is the conviviality of an online community that's there to support and help one another. Which actually calls to mind my upcoming business venture. Has this ever happened to you? I feel stricken with an overarching sense of self-worth and contentment. Try the Big Knee Reusable Internet Society Simulator. Just pull one card from each deck and rearrange them however you like in complete defiance of English syntax, just like the real internet. Send me money right this instant and you will get, at no extra charge, the special Lady Edition. The Big Knee Reusable Internet Society Simulator. Act now or and if you don't want one, I forgive you.